Okay, everybody. I have something really cool to tell you about. If you haven't heard yet about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain here. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one single place. Now, the way that you can do this is you got to download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm, and then you can get started. It's really fun. We just switched over recently here at All2ReelToo, and I'm enjoying it so far. So be sure to check it out and let us know what you think. Okay, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of All2ReelToo. My name is Michael E. Cullen II, and with me, as always, is
Matthew Allen. I was not for this interview that you're about to listen to. I secretly moonlight as a speedster, and I got caught up in a different timeline. I totally forgot about the interview, so I missed it. I might be able to jump in and but that might alter the timeline somewhat, so I'm not sure if I should do that or not.
Yeah, you probably don't want to do that because maybe things will get worse than they already are in 2020.
Right, yeah, exactly, so.
Oh, that would be great. Not really. No. I guess it couldn't get much worse. But, well, be careful what you wish for. Knock on plastic.
Yeah. I
don't have any wood nearby, so I'm knocking on the plastic. Anyways,
I do. I got, there we go. I got it.
You got me. Okay. And, so, today's episode, I had an interview, with the very talented and, very insightful and entertaining, Jeffrey Weissman, who some people know as the second George McFly in the Back to the Future trilogy. He was also in the movie Pale Rider. He was in Twilight Zone, the movie. He's done dozens of television appearances. He's very entertaining guy, very nice guy. I think this is one of my favorite interviews so far, so hopefully everybody enjoys it, because he was just full of knowledge and stuff, and very kind-hearted, good soul, I think. So, yeah, so, I don't know. So, let's just jump right in here to the interview here here's me and Jeffrey Weissman. How are you doing today with all the craziness in the world that's going on?
Like everybody else, probably, stressed out. Crazy.
Yeah.
So, I've got sort of the triple whammy right now with all the smoke and ash falling from the sky from the West Coast being on fire up here. I'm in the north of California in the wine country, and so I think the closest fire is about 25 miles away.
Oh, wow.
But we've had them to the north, the east, and the south. So starting after that big lightning, the electrical storm we had about 3 weeks ago, we had about 15,000 lightning strikes, and it started 700 fires.
Oh, wow.
And, not all of them were really big, but the few that one up near Armstrong Woods, where we like to go visit the redwoods. That one really affected a lot of my friends. Whole towns, being evacuated with people I knew and upsetting people's lives for a couple weeks. And then now with the higher atmospheric smoke and ash from the Oregon fires, other friends who are just getting returned to their homes down near Santa Cruz and so on and so forth. That's pretty crazy making on top of course, the pandemic. Yeah. And my beloved is at risk, so I can't really go out, or she can't even go out without really being cautious and diligent. And then, seeing all the shit politically is so upsetting. It's just insane, with the denial and bullshit.
Yeah.
Because I have fans around the world, I had quite a few fans starting to write me in February saying, don't do what we're doing in our country, like in Italy and Southeast Asia, people I know from other places. Don't tell everyone, don't do like we have done, because we're paying for it. And, the body counts were so high there. And when you don't have leadership that really does the right thing, we're paying for it. We shouldn't have 200,000 dead.
No, not at all.
We're very close. And anyway, but that on top of not, having pretty much all the work that I have, I diversify as an actor. I not only film and TV and stage, but also environmental theater and live in-person work and fan cons and all of that, just wipe the slate. I have been able to do some teaching, virtually, but the in-person teaching too, you've got to be intimate. You have to, if you're doing scene work, the actors have to be connected with each other and close and stuff, and it's just too dangerous, and I can't bring it home.
You want
so
there I am. That interaction with an actor. It's kind of hard to not have that if you're trying to teach them or even just act in the scene. I know a lot of people are doing Zoom acting and stuff too, and I'm actually very, very successful with the Zoom stuff. But there's the studio work, which is really my favorite. I love classwork both at university level and private studio level, and to get people to sit down at a table to practice their cold reading technique, or to do work on connection just for acting technique exercises, you need to see the electricity going on between the two, and you can somewhat on Zoom. Anyways, but it's frustrating because you can't be right in there with them, and well, you can to a certain extent. What can I say? I'm a Libra. Yeah,
I'll see the good sides in bad things because it's my nature. Mm-hmm. Because I believe in humankind, and I believe in the goodness in people and heart. I even think the corrupted or ignorant are generally innocent who have blinders on. I don't.
Yeah, I know how that is. It's like I was always taught by like my grandfather and other people that if you see like a lot of bad in somebody, look for that one good thing in them, sort of thing. So you got to try to find that sometimes, Yeah,
I think. Yeah. I don't think people are inherently evil. I think you choose evil. You practice bad things, you become that, but you can make choices to rise above it. And that's one of the reasons I got into acting. I was, first of all, a ham. Wanted to be the center of attention and so on and so forth. But then I learned that there's so much more to storytelling, and the best part of it is to enlighten and to elevate and to educate. If you can educate while entertain, great stuff.
It's always good. It's always good to examine the human condition through art. I think that's kind of what we're here for.
Do you know what we're here for?
Yeah, I think it's just to love each other and understand each other.
Right. And what better way to celebrate that but by reflecting. My friend's show that I just finished watching, he went through his youth, his kindergarten classes, through his grade school through his junior high through high school as a black man in a very racist community.
Oh, wow.
And it was just beautiful to watch Cooper's storytelling, because I did improv with him back in L.A., Los Angeles, with theater sports, which Whose Line Is It Anyways, based on Keith Johnstone's theater sports. And Cooper and I did these wonderful improv games and storytelling way back before Whose Line was around, with people like Brad Sherwood and Wayne Brady came in later, and Greg Proops, a lot of folk who were on Whose Line, Michael McShane, Brian Lohman. And we're doing storytelling and really being silly as hell, just being wacky, but also doing it with a narrative that sometimes would go very serious. And he's taken all these tools, like if you know who Brad Sherwood is from Whose Line, Brad would spend hours working on his physical prowess, his detailed technique is just so fine, with not only being physical in his pantomime, but also doing sound effects at the same time. And in the show, one of the first things Cooper did, as his mom talking to him, as a toddler, he just spits on the iron and she starts ironing. And watching it with my wife turns to me and says, "Wow, he's a good ironer." I mean, that's how good his technique looks. So that is, it's an art, and I have been a clown. I do work in theme parks even and such, and sometimes knowing how to blow a balloon and make it into an animal gets me out of very tight situations in foreign countries that look as, I can make friends with the kids at least. Yeah. Because universal language. And these tools, I'll say, I spent 16 years at Juilliard to learn, balloon animals.
That's cool. It's a joke.
Anyway.
I know, I gotcha. I'm sorry. I'm a little slow tonight, but I'm
a little slow all the time.
Yeah. Hey folks, this is Michael E. Cullen II from the podcast that you're listening to right now, along with
Matthew Haas.
We just wanted to tell you about our great podcast called Super. It's called All2Real. And on that show, what do we do, Matt?
We watch biopics, and then we talk about whether or not the movie matched up with the real story or not.
So
it's a lot more exciting than that, though.
Yeah, so we analyze the real story and the real story.
Get it?
Get it?
Real.
Yeah, they're spelled differently, folks. You can guess which one I said which way. Anyways, so sometimes we have a guest, sometimes we don't. But we talk about great movies like Shattered Glass and The Social Network and Futile and Stupid Gesture, among others. Those are some of the ones that we've covered so far, and we're going to cover a lot more. So please subscribe on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your great, fun podcasts. And be sure to share it with your friends.
Do it.
And make sure you're not afraid to get all too real. Bye-bye. So how did you, get started into acting and entertainment in general?
Well, I grew up on, from watching black and white TV turn into color and seeing the fun that was to be had. These guys in these boxes were having a blast, from the variety shows to the sitcoms to the cartoon hosts. It was like, wow, got sucked into it. And my folks were in the peripheral of the entertainment world in that my mom and dad, for a little while my dad, but my mom for many years was a bail bondswoman. And she had bailed celebrities out of jail, like Winston Churchill's daughter and hot charges, or Lenny Bruce, several times for obscenity and so forth. And then my dad ran these clubs, these private gambling, backgammon, and bridge clubs in Hollywood or West Hollywood or around Los Angeles and Beverly Hills. And his partner was Lauren Green for a while, and I remember meeting George Weissman, his partner for his boss, actually, at one club, who had arranged all the music on the Wizard of Oz. And then I'd go with my babysitter to meet. I must have been about 4 or 5 years old, and I remember going to meet Omar Sharif at his club, and then going with the babysitter to see him up on the big screen shortly thereafter, and she kind of flipped out both times. And I was like, wow, there's that, because that was I love my babysitter, Susie, and if that's the way to impress her, I guess I have to do that. It was kind of inbred early on in me that it was something to do, something to strive for, and I was already kind of the ham clown of the family, and was doing that in school, and then basically around middle school, 7th grade or so, I had some guidance with teachers moving me into doing poetry and plays on stage, taking it seriously somewhat, and in junior high getting cast in shows like Blithe Spirit by Noel Coward, or doing shows during summer programs, like an off-Broadway show called The Me Nobody Knows. I think it was 1972, I think it was 14, and just last night, I was in a salon of actors from the Actors Gang, which is founded by friends of mine, Ron Campbell, Lee Ehrenberg, probably from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and Tim, whatever Tim's last name was, he wasn't there last night, but nonetheless, Lee Ehrenberg, Tim Robbins, and Lee Ehrenberg. At the end of the night, after doing all these 20 actors that are doing their different sets of whatever it was that inspired them for the theme at the salon, Lee at the end of the night said, I just want to point out that Jeffrey, who's here tonight, he was in my first show. I was 11 years old and he was 14. And we've been friends ever since. And that's something that I found early on with casts and shows, that they're a family. They become like a unit. Even though it may be short-lived, there's this very intense period where you have to open up your emotions, you have to open up your connection to the story, to each other. The relationship is everything in a good show. And then, sometimes the connection is so deep with your fellow performers that you stay friends forever. And that's an example of that I'm sharing with Lee. So in high school, I actually, before then, I kind of put my foot down with my parents. I said, I want to be an actor. Let me do it. I had friends. I knew Anissa Jones from Family Affair, who played Buffy, and knew Lisa Gerritsen for a little bit, and various other child actors. And I was like, they're working. Why can't I? I want to save money for college. You guys, my parents are struggling. I could save my own money by work. Yeah. They didn't want me to. Oh. Because of the clubs that they ran or owned or managed, they saw actors as kind of gambling, drinking, swearing people they didn't want me to be. Yeah. And I remember my dad coming home and saying, do you know who Don Adams is? And I said, yeah, get smart. Because I asked him today, I said, Don, my son wants to be an actor. Do you have any advice? And he said, Wally, tell him to forget about it. It's about 10% talent and 90% luck. And I was okay, well, sure, but I still want to do it. And I remember when I was 14, I'd heard Mel Brooks was shooting his next movie in my neighborhood in Santa Monica, where I was living. So instead of taking the bus home, I walked home from school through the promenade, and I started seeing people in Victorian evening wear. I was like, oh, it must be around here. And there was one guy whose mustache was flapping. I said, excuse me, sir, your mustache is coming down. And he goes, oh, is it? Who are you? I said, well, I'm an actor. Oh, yeah? What have you done? And then I started listening. I was in Merchant of Venice and Dark of the Moon and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, really? You want to meet Mel? And I was like, Brooks? And he goes, yes, come with me. And he took me to the Mayfair Music Hall where they were shooting the Puttin' on the Ritz number with, of course, Gene and Peter Boyle and company.
Yeah.
And I was floored. The first person I met was Marty Feldman, who wasn't dressed in costume, but rather in his street outfit. I remember he was wearing like a beret, and he wore a man bag. I was like, wow, it's the first time I've seen a man carrying or wearing a merce. and I remember, I didn't think twice when I was a toddler carrying my mom's purse around, and I wear a man bag now too. So I've come full circle. But it was very cool to kind of be on that set and make that connection. Roy Wallace was that extra's name, and I became friends with him, and he started in a little bit mentoring me. He would give me a call saying, I got a call today to be on Medical Center. You want to come along? I was like, yes.
Wow. And
I go down and hang out all day on the Medical Center set. And, I remember I had a private moment with Chad Everett. I was fooling around on this giant staircase that was leftover set from Funny Lady that had just shot there. And I think it was at the 20th Century, wherever it was. I don't recall. And I was hanging out on the set, kind of fantasizing, doing anything I knew that was appropriate for that set, and hanging out. And then I saw a figure down at the bottom of this set come over and pull out a flask and take a swig. I was like, oh, that's Chad Everett having a swig off his flask. and he raised his flask and did some little Shakespearean passage. And so I then replied with something from Merchant of Venice that I remembered. And he looked up at me like he'd been busted. And at the same time, he kind of winked his eye and said, nice kid, nice. And anyway, so I got my foot on a few sets, and I still did shows at school and some community theater, but I was verboten for trying to go pro with my folks. And out of high school, my folks saw that I wasn't going to give it up, and I asked for their help. They helped me get some money together to get professional headshots. And I also joined a casting company where non-union people could get their foot in the door and do crowd work as extras in films. And I just wanted to get on some sets. I wanted to get on some studio lots. And I had made quite a few films, actually, with friends in junior high and high school, and was really looking forward to being on a pro set. I even visited some location shoots in my neighborhood, and like I mentioned, the Young Frankenstein. Remember the FBI being lectured by one of the co-stars who gave me a rundown on my report card, who said, you got an A in English and a B in history. What's this D in math? Kid, how are you going to know if your agent is cheating you? Well, you got to do better in math. Anyway, so I started getting these little bits in crowd scenes in films like FM and I Want to Hold Your Hand and The Rose. And then kind of I had 4 different scenes, sort of roles in a film called Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And in the scene where I get brainwashed by Alice Cooper, I did some dance moves, which elevated my contract to a union contract. Oh, so wow. I was finally all of a sudden eligible for joining the union when it was $350 to join. I think it's $6,500 now.
Oh, wow.
But that was 78.
Yeah.
So, but I remember at the time I was like, I got to pay my rent. I can't afford to join a union because I don't know. Anyway, around that same time, I had a director, I think it was Gordon Davidson, the artistic director of the Music Center, Dorothy Chandler, downtown LA, say I was auditioning. I think I even had a callback for Brighton Beach Memoirs. And he said, you've got the talent, you're good, but no one's going to take you seriously unless you get some serious training. What do you recommend? He said, of course, Juilliard. And I said, I don't think my folks will afford that. And is there anything on the West Coast? And he recommended the American Conservatory Theater. So I set my sights on getting into the ACT. I auditioned once, didn't make it, but Alan Fletcher said, if you don't make it this time, just keep trying because you've got a lot of talent. And so it took me a few years, and I finally moved actually to San Francisco to be closer to get in. And in 81 was accepted, and was doing my intermediate studies between ACT and the San Francisco State, and fell into an opportunity to audition for a lead in a major motion picture that notice had gone up in the theater department of San Francisco State. And I was really working hard. I was juggling up to 6 different scripts at a time and feeling like I was really getting my instrument in tune. And I didn't necessarily think I was right for this role. I had a friend who I thought was right, and I wanted him to go to this open call. And the day of it, I made sure he was going to go, and he said he wasn't going to go. And I said, "You got to go." His dad was a very famous director, and said to his son, he kind of sabotaged him and said, "You can't act." And I said, "Show your dad up. Say, get this thing." I said, he said, "I'll go if you'll go." So I went with him, and my friend Lincoln and I both got called back by this director out of the 500 guys at this open call, going through them 6 at a time, meeting the casting director with their applications and stuff. And he and I both got called back to read with this actress. And then he got released, and then I was told to hang out. I was like, oh. And so they had another scene. They wanted me to read another scene, and I did. And they said, "Okay, thank you." And I guess that's it. I think I'm done. So I'm about to my car, and the gal that I read with, who was an assistant to the director, I guess, said, "Listen, Martin wants to see you again. Come back. The director wants to read you again or meet with you again." So I go back in, and Martin Brest, who's pretty famous now, took me aside and said, "Hey, you did really good on that first reading. The second reading, not so much." And I said, "Well, I didn't expect to be here. I'm kind of hungover. My girlfriend just graduated at Santa Cruz, and I was at her graduation party last night, and I had to borrow my friend's razor. I didn't expect to be here." He goes, fine. Let's just read that first scene again." I read it again. He turned to Wally Nocita, and said, I want to test him. And so I ended up being in line and signed up for screen testing for this film called The Genius. And Warren Oates was attached to it at that point. I think they were trying to get John Lennon to it. Anyway, as it turned out, the film went into turnaround because Warren Oates died, and MGM and UA had merged. The execs were butting heads with each other and all. But it was all very exciting because here, all of a sudden, going from middle of my studies into perhaps the heart of Hollywood was quite a treat, and is a very rare story. So I was very lucky to have this much happen. And one day I got a call from an agent who had just opened up a West Coast office. She'd come out of the New York office of William Morris and opened a Beverly Hills boutique agency, and said, "My friend Martin Brest told me that you're his favorite for the lead in this film. And I'd like to meet you if you don't have an agent representing you. Want to gain your trust because you have to have an agent negotiate your contract before you screen test."
Yeah.
I was like, okay. And how are we going to do that? She says, my friend is producing a film called The Right Stuff right now up in San Francisco. And I'm going to come up and visit him, and then I'd like to see you too while I'm up there. So this agent named Paula came up and visited me, presented me a nice fine bottle of wine, wooed me, and I, of course, agreed for her to negotiate for me or be my agent. And eventually the film got back on track, and the screen tests were back on track to happen. And I went down to do my screen test. The name of the film changed to War Games. And I tested the same day. It was Dana Carvey and Brian Backer, John Crawford and Eric Stoltz, a couple other really great guys. I remember there were 6 of us who tested, all of us with Ali Sheedy. I was the only one who came in to test without an agent. So I felt really special because they had that open call in Chicago, New York, LA, San Francisco, and Seattle, I believe. And so my ego was like, whoa. And I remember during the screen test, Ali Sheedy kind of looking through me a few times. I was like, why can't I catch her eye? What's going on here? And there was Eric Stoltz in the corner of the soundstage kind of checking out. Was she making eyes at him? What's going on here? And years later, I ran into Eric, and I asked him, I said, in 82, were you and Ali an item? And he was like, during War Games when we were testing for that. He goes, 82, yeah, we were living together.
That's why.
Anyway, none of us got it. Of course, Matthew Broderick got it. But I got this agent, and she said, you've got to move to L.A. And shortly thereafter, I was kind of a hot item, because I screen tested for this major role, and a lot of doors opened for me, and I had a lot of really great general auditions, which is kind of a rare thing, a thing of the past now. And about 3 months after returning to LA, I landed my first role after auditioning for George Miller, who was asked by Spielberg to direct a segment of Twilight Zone movie, the remake of Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, with John Lithgow playing the William Shatner role. Mm-hmm. And that was a blast to be a part of. So that was my first co-star role in a film.
I remember that movie scaring me as a kid, so yeah.
It was. I was very proud to be in that segment. First of all, because George Miller was a delightful actor's director. Yeah. And Garrett Brown was there one of the first times the Steadicam worked. And John was a sweetheart to work with, just delightful. And Donna Dixon was lovely as can be. We got very close very quickly. And Abby Lane was terrific. J.D. Johnston. And, everyone on that set, once again, was like a family. It was a great ensemble, and everyone had a great time. I had, unfortunately, contracted cat scratch fever while we were shooting. My girlfriend at the time had a cat who had kittens in the middle of the night on the second day of shooting. I remember I woke up with this kitten hanging from my arm, and I pulled it on. I was like, "What are you doing?" And went back to sleep. And the next day, I developed swollen glands in my arm. Oh, wow. And eventually, by the next day, 2 days later, I had red lines going up my arm, and the Warner Brothers nurse sent me to a local doctor who gave me 3 shots of penicillin in the butt and said, that was blood poisoning going to your heart. So the rest of the shoot, I was a little off kilter, which kind of worked for the mayhem that we were depicting. But I was also kind of pissed at Spielberg and I think others were too, because the accident with Vic Morrow and the children being killed, that had happened, earlier in the summer, 3-4 months previous. And it seemed like it was very bad taste to finish the film, to complete it. But he had, the accident was on the last day of shooting, so they figured the Landis segment was almost complete. And he had tapped, Joe Dante and George Miller and, his own segment, and wanted to finish it. And I thought it was ballsy and kind of bad taste, but I was also grateful that it was, first of all, the best segment in the movie, in my opinion. And also that it was my first co-star role.
Yeah, I didn't even know that cat scratch fever was a real thing. All I had ever heard was like the Ted Nugent song, so I didn't know.
I used to love Ted.
What happened to him?
His mind went though. God, really? I drank the Kool-Aid, Ted.
I went to his house one time, and tried to get in. But I couldn't get in. We had like a buzzer that he was, because I live in Ohio and he was living in Michigan at the time, and it was.
Where is hospitality? I mean,
know.
Come on.
I talked to him over a recording, and then it was, a speaker, and that was it. And then
I did a video with him and his wife while I was playing characters at Universal Studios in Hollywood, and they were very sweet at the time, and we had a good day. But I didn't get to know. I didn't even have a chance to tell him. I used to know all the lyrics to Stranglehold.
Yeah, he's kind of, I think, lost it a little, but
I think he got into a stranglehold. Yeah,
definitely. Or maybe he got cat scratch fever and it really went to his brain.
He didn't get the penicillin.
Yeah. What's like one of the like coolest opportunities you've had so far when you've done in film or stage or anything?
Coolest opportunities.
Yeah.
I have a tendency to blow my coolest opportunities because I get so starstruck or nervous or self-conscious or too cautious, not wanting to step on toes. I remember when I was working on Pale Rider with Clint Eastwood, he had a fallout and fired the catering company that we started the film with. And the next day, the new catering company came in, and we were shooting on location on top of a mountain outside of Ketchum, Sun Valley, Idaho, and it's ironically snowing in October. and this new caterer wants to impress, obviously, and we're having steak and lobster on the top of a mountain in a blizzard, and it's just Clint and myself and my ex-wife at the table, and everything I said to Clint, I seemed to put my foot in my mouth. So like, nice weather, Clint, and it's like, yeah, I didn't expect it to be snowing. And I had a tendency to really kind of not be relaxed and, how shall I say, not starstruck.
Yeah.
Because he's very imposing. I remember about to shoot my first scene in the film. My character is sort of this half-wit minor kid who does a little comedy relief in the film and then cries heavily when Daddy gets killed. And I follow Clint, who's going down the road to scout out the next shot after my shot. We've already blocked my scene. And I follow him down because I haven't had a proper introduction. When I got cast, I went in and was taped by his producer for 6 months and, had everything for my sense memory, for emotional recall, for my Zen technique, for my Meisner fantasy chart. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. I was going to cry on cue, and I did, and I got cast, which was really lovely. Kind of thanks to Chris Penn. I got to sidetrack for a second. Chris Penn had run in Sean Penn's brother, Chris, wonderful actor. Unfortunately, not with us anymore, but he had met Clint at a party in Malibu or something. He said, "I want to do a film with you." And Clint said, "Okay," and he sent him the script, a pill writer, and offered him the role of Eddie Conway. Chris threw it back and said, "I don't want to play a good guy, I want to play a bad guy." And so Clint moved him over to LaHood's son, the character that attempts rape on Sidney Penny's character. And the actor playing Teddy Conway, the role I played, moved into Eddie. So the role came open, and that hot agent that I had, Paula, sort of found out about this role because it didn't come out in the breakdowns, but she was kind of assertive and found out from the casting director that it was open. So she submitted me on it, and that's how I got the audition. And so Clint cast me from the tape. But we hadn't met yet, and we were about to shoot my first scene. So I followed him down into the woods, and he turned around and he saw me there, and he's in his duster and his hat. Even though he's directing, he's still dressed in character, so he can just jump into any scene he has to shoot. And he goes, "Yeah." I go, "Mr. Eastwood, I'm Jeffrey Weissman. I just want to introduce myself." And he goes, "I know who you are. Who do you think hired you?" I was like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course."
That's got to be intimidating.
Well, but I still at the same time needed that icebreaker. I needed the connection, to keep from the icon and try to find the human in there so I could feel comfortable and relaxed. And which I love about Clint, because as an actor's director that he is, he never says action. That he felt that he probably learned from Don Siegel, who probably learned it from John Ford, that when you say action, actors generally tense up and get self-conscious.
Yeah. And
often he'll shoot the rehearsal, so it's much more natural. If you get in fact, a few times Clint would shoot a rehearsal and then say, "All right, let's move on." And I remember the one time that crying over Daddy's dead body, Chuck, who plays my brother, didn't hit his mark. I had to take his mark, and I almost kicked Doug, the dead Daddy, in the head with my boot sliding on the fake snow. And when I heard Clint say, "Let's move on," that was good, and it was rehearsal. I was in Clint's face, so I said, "Come on, Clint, that was not right." And he goes, "No, we'll just cut from your face." So I knew right then that I then had the key shot of me crying. It wasn't Chuck who was supposed to have had that. And so I couldn't argue with that, though.
Yeah, I remember reading that about Clint years ago, how he would not say action. And I'm an indie filmmaker myself, so when I would direct things, when I started out, of course, I said action all the time, but then I just started saying, like, "Whenever you're ready, go ahead."
That's exactly what he would say.
Yeah.
Says, "Whenever you're ready."
Yeah, and it's a lot easier now, especially with video, so you don't have to worry about wasting film. So you can just let it go, run the whole time. So Hi, folks. This is Michael E. Cullen II from the podcast that you're listening to right now, along with
manager Matthew Haas.
You got promoted?
Yes.
Damn it. Okay. Anyways, folks, do you like the show Superstore? I don't know. I asked the folks and nobody's answering me.
Because they're not here.
Oh,
but we love
damn it. Yeah, we love it, though. Okay, folks, if you like it as much as we do, you're really going to like the Super Story podcast, which is a podcast where Matthew and I go episode by episode and give our little opinions and thoughts on it. Sometimes we have guests, sometimes we don't. Just depends on how we're feeling.
Yeah.
And, so if you like this podcast and like our little crazy banter,
then you should definitely check this out. Or I might get sad. And when I get sad, it gets pretty sad.
yeah,
So
I can't deal with him when he's sad.
no one can really. So
Yeah. So check out Super Story Podcast right here where you get this podcast, Super Story Podcast. I'd be remiss not to ask about how you replaced Crispin Glover in Back to the Future 2 and 3. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's hard for me to understand that too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I had shortly after the Pale Rider Clint Eastwood film, and what else did I do that year? Scarecrow and Mrs. King. In between the TV and film work, I needed something consistent to pay the bills. And I was looking for work kicking around, and a friend of mine who played Stan Laurel of a Laurel and Hardy lookalike team called me up one day and asked if I'd ever played Stanley. I was like, no, but I need the work. What's up? And it turns out his Oliver Hardy partner at Universal Studios on the tour had lost his partner and needed a new one. And I said, get me in there, I'll go. And I auditioned. I didn't know much about Laurel and Hardy. I remembered seeing some of their films as a kid, growing up and loving it. But the actor who played Oliver Hardy knew my work from a production of Romeo and Juliet I'd done, where I played Mercutio. And he turned to the boss and said, I'll train this guy. He's got talent. And within a couple of weeks, I was doing a passable Stan Laurel. And I started playing not only Stan Laurel, but Charlie Chaplin, and put together also playing Groucho Marx at Universal on the tour. So if any of your guests, viewers, listeners were at Universal between, say, 87 and 2001 and had a photograph with Stan Laurel or Charlie Chaplin or Groucho Marx, it might be me. So I was working up at the tour, and the agent who got me the job there at Universal called me up one day and asked if I knew who Crispin Glover was. And I said, of course, yeah, I did a film with Crispin in 83, the year before we started shooting Back to the Future, at the American Film Institute. And I thought Crispin was a fascinating actor, got his phone number, tried to stay in touch. And he said, well, they're looking for a photo double for him for a film. And I'd heard, of course, the Back to the Future sequel was in talks, sort of being kicked around. And I asked him, was that for sequel Back to the Future? He said, I'm not at liberty to say. He was like, get me in there. And I met with the assistant directors, and they liked, obviously, knowing that I'd worked on Pale Rider and Twilight Zone and other films like Johnny Dangerously and, Crackers with Louis Malle, etc. And they then moved me into the next phase and had me go to casting. And the casting director had me read the scene where Marty and George are hanging the laundry in the backyard from the first film. And I know they were reading other actors, but I guess they liked me enough, then they started sending me to makeup, where I was being fitted for face molds and body casts for special effects. I was like, well, if they're doing this, I must have this job, but I hadn't been hired yet. So it was all very kind of mysterious. And then they decided they were going to screen test me. So I had a screen test in the young George makeup, which maybe resembled Crispin. I was like, oh, they must need George in two places at the same time. That's what I figured.
Yeah.
And I remember Warren Beatty's version of Dick Tracy was shooting in the studio soundstage next door. And I ran into William Forsythe and was it Dustin Hoffman? Anyway, these guys were in their incredible makeups. And here I was in this odd makeup, and I'm looking at them going, what the fuck are you supposed to do? And they're looking at me going like, what the fuck are you supposed to do? Anyway, my audition, my screen test with for Bob Z, for Robert Zemeckis and Dean Cundy went well. I just, did my thing as George. I knew Crispin's center of gravity and his gestures and did that. And I heard Dean say, hey, Bob, I think we have Crispin without the trouble.
Wow.
And I was like, what? What does that mean? And then my makeup artist, Ken Chase, he started saying things like, I don't know if Crispin's going to be in this. And I was like, well, what's that all about? And so I figured, I had to put things in my mind together in my mind because no one's telling me anything, except what I can infer from these statements. But I figured that Crispin, because he just rocked George McFly so much in the first film. And I was like, God, I know that guy. He's knocking it out of the park. This is great. But I figured he had, because his star was rising from River's Edge and other films that he had nice supporting roles in, that he had another film that he was shooting that he couldn't get out of to return to do George. And I was like, my God. Okay, well, they must have his permission for me to wear these prosthetics, make me look like him. Little did I know they didn't.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, and it was odd because on the set, I was often referred to as Crispin.
Weird.
Oh, yeah. It was odd. I think Bob Z started catching himself and stopped, and then Mike and I started getting along. At first, though, Mike was like, oh, man, Crispin ain't going to like this, and he saw my makeup. And then by the end of the week, he was introducing me to his agent. I think he wanted to get his agent's thoughts on the legal ramifications because, his agent was also an attorney. Yeah, it was not so comfortable at first, but by the end of the week, Mike and I were having a beer in his trailer and shooting the shit. It was nice to be a part of an amazing ensemble. I mean, Zemeckis did brilliant casting.
Yeah.
His choice of actors across the board. They spent a long time. Johnny Depp auditioned for George McFly in the first film. They offered the part of Marty to Ralph Macchio. Ralph Macchio turned it down. It's the initial casting. I remember hearing Chris Lloyd say that when he first got that script, he threw it in the garbage. And because he only wanted to do serious stage, he was going to do a show in New York Broadway with Colleen Dewhurst, who kept getting sicker and sicker, and they pushed the show. And he was like, "My God, what am I going to do?" And his girlfriend happened to have saved that script. Otherwise, they were going to have Jeff Goldblum, I think.
Oh wow, that'd have been a different movie.
John Lithgow passed on Doc Brown because he was taking that year off, I think.
Huh.
Anyway,
yeah.
There's this wonderful book that's the sort of Back to the Future encyclopedia that has a lot of the casting sheets. You can see who they were considering: Dudley Moore, and John Cleese, Doc Brown.
Yeah,
a great part. I play Doc Brown now.
Do you?
I do.
At Universal or?
No, my good friend Jimmy D. Philippis is at Universal in Hollywood, and I'm going to blank on his name. I just did Back to 1885 with him. It'll come to me. I know the guys in Florida as well, Universal. Yeah. But no, I have friends with these time machine DeLoreans that from time to time do events, and they want a Doc Brown. And if the client then finds out that I was George in part 2 and 3, they have a double wet.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But then at the beginning of the pandemic, one of my Uber Back to the Future fan friends, Kevin Bosch, contacted me and said, "We're doing a remake of part 2. Would you do a cameo as Doc Brown or as George?" And I got my wife and I to do a scene as George and Lorraine backstage after the Enchantment of the Sea dance.
Oh,
so
cool.
I did a cameo in the Project 88. You can see it. It's 300 fans from 9 different countries remade Back to the Future Part 2 in 88 scenes.
Oh, wow.
So check it out. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, definitely.
And then
watch that.
One of my Facebook friends, Ian Drescher, wrote a Shakespearean version, as if Shakespeare had written Back to the Future. And he had posted that an abbreviated version of his book was going to be produced by this company out of London called The Show Must Go Online. And I wrote him, I said, "Are you still casting?" He goes, "Well, I'm not casting, but I'll send you their way. They may be." And I wrote these people, and I said, if you're still casting, I might be interested in being a part of this, with my hopes of playing Doc, because I have a mind-reading helmet, and I have a flux capacitor, and I have a lot of the props. And they flipped. They were like, they realized who I was. It turns out Ian, my friend on Facebook, he didn't know who I was.
Oh, wow.
Until after I was cast.
That's
kind of funny. So my wife was my art director, my costumer, and my camera person, because we're Zooming it. And I'm literally, at one point, she throws my computer on the floor because I have to crawl up the floor. She turns it sideways so it looks like I'm crawling up the clock tower. Nice. And then we rigged here in the back, here at the rope going across with a hanger. I do the slide for life, anyway, that's online too. So if you go to, I don't know if it's by its initials, TSMGO, The Show Must Go Online, or The Show Must Go Online, spelled out. They started at the beginning of the pandemic, readings of all of Shakespeare's canon.
Oh, wow.
And they threw in these other ones of Ian's adaptations of Mean Girls, Star Wars, and Back to the Future, as if Shakespeare had written those. So up to this week, I think we're up to the 28th show in 24 weeks or whatever it is now. And I also did 12th Night. I played Sir Toby Belch for them. And even though it's readings, we're performing it. We have 3 days, 2.5 days rehearsal before we go on, and they cast from around the world, and it's a blast. It's a great way for actors not to go crazy and give themselves something to do.
Yeah, something to do during the pandemic. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
It's horrific how many gigs and events I've lost. Probably over, I don't know, $40,000.
Yeah.
Government offered me $600 a week for a little while until the end of July. That was nice.
Yeah. It's sad. I have a full-time job, luckily, but, it's just like I was in the middle of shooting a short film, and then the pandemic hit, and done, basically, until I can figure out ways to shoot it during the pandemic. So, I'm working
there are
on.
a lot of folk I see, even friends I have who are at risk, who are taking the risk because they have to. They're going under.
Yeah.
And are, on set with shields in front of their face, masks, and the only time they let it down is for makeup, maybe, or they do their own makeup. I still fear because, once again, it's often asymptomatic, and people don't have a fever, and they've got it. It's a deadly virus that
it's sad.
Can't take chances.
I've had some friends, parents die from it and different things like that. So it's scary. It's just.
Yeah, early on I lost 3 cousins.
Wow.
And then several friends. So it's real. The hoaxers piss me off more than
me too.
You can believe.
I've gotten in so many fights on Facebook that I need to pull back from it sometimes, just because I'll tell people it's real, and then they'll be like, oh, it's a plandemic or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, you're just kind of.
It's bullshit. It's murder.
Yeah.
With the herd immunity theory, that's murder.
Yeah.
And I've unfriended dear friends and some relatives because of what you said. They refuse to kind of see reality, which is frightening.
Yeah, sadly, since that, and then the Black Lives Matter movement picking up more steam lately, I've had to unfriend family and friends because of it, because you start to find out who buys into the bullshit that's out there, and you're like, oh, yeah, I don't really want to associate with you right now. So
yeah, I used to, I grew up in the 60s when segregation was, they were trying to put the LBJ, did the Civil Rights Act, and the integration in schools was going on where I was living. And I remember 4th through 6th grade, no, not in 4th, but in 5th, all of a sudden I had a Latin best friend and a black best friend and an Asian best friend, which I hadn't before. But I didn't necessarily understand why racism was so rampant, and to see that it has been, kind of just still there and hidden, is saddening and maddening.
It is.
And it's systemic, and I just hope that people will see, like my friend show that I just saw, Cooper's show, was really magnificent, where he dealt with his own not understanding of racism until it was in his face, bit by bit through his growing up, and it's called Black When I Was a Boy. Great. So if you look for it, Cooper Bates, he
definitely
really knocked it out of the park.
That's cool. What kind of advice would you give to anybody that's interested in getting into acting at all?
Like Don Adams, forget about it.
Yep.
No. Get training. If you're serious, you'll train. Don't go into it for dreams of money or fame. If you're going for fame and you're going for money, you're in it for the wrong reason. And train. Any casting director worth their medal goes right to your training on your resume. And then be smart and proactive. I mentor actors all the time, often very young ones. I've had one actor contact me when he was 13, and within a year he was proving himself and getting his relationship with the lens. Sent me a PSA, a commercial, and a student film that he had done. And within a year after that, he cast me in a film, an indie film that we co-starred in. And right after that, he and I co-starred in a short together that became his calling card. And by the age of 17, he was on his way to Hollywood. Within 6 months, he was playing Bootsy Collins in the James Brown biopic at Universal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and his name, Justin Hall, Jay Hall.
That was a great movie, too. Yeah.
He was confident. My friend Claire Elizabeth, when she was 9, I started mentoring her, got her performing a lot of Crabtree and Living History and live theater and educational stuff. And she's broke her mold. She learned to sing, dance, and do monologues. The next year, she wrote her own script and starred with me playing her dad in a horror film that her parents, produced. And she had her own little show on public TV, public access. And then she started doing pro shoots, winning awards as this little girl playing these dynamic roles in shorts and features. Now she's a slam poet and a makeup artist. Wow. You never know what path you're going to take, but if you have the inkling to, I, as you know, as a director, you empower yourself if you learn the tools that actors use. As soon as you can speak in acting terms that an actor knows, you can draw out a performance instead of saying, well, I need you to cry here. You need to be able to tell an actor or give an actor the circumstances to create the effect and the means, the ends that you want, as opposed to giving them the ends and expect them to get there, because not all actors, are trained. You need to be able to work with them. And if you know a little bit of Meisner or fantasy charging, or if you know any sense memory or emotional recall, or if you know relaxation stuff, that all goes very far in the 16th hour on a set that's over budget.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I acted for years before I ever directed, which was, I think, helped me out a lot when in the few. I mean, I've not done anything spectacular, but eventually I think I will. So we'll see. I have faith in myself. So one day I'll do that big one. Yep. No,
you've got it. And even if you don't, you keep striving and doing the work that you can, that you and your team can do, and you all do your best.
Yeah. And I think that's probably, a good advice too, is just, motivation and keep, determination, I guess is what I'm looking for, the word. Yeah. But
that's the thing, that if these young actors that I've seen move to Hollywood and are successful within a few years, the saying that an overnight success takes about 20 years, there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
But I've seen others do it in a fraction of that time because they're so determined and they have blinders on and they take no bullshit and they are clean about where their creative process and their creative stuff is and where their business stuff is. And I always ask my students to keep 2 journals to make sure that those even on the student films that they work on, those that are focused and hardworking, stay in touch with them because eventually they're going to be successful. I remember being in acting class with Lawrence Bender, Quentin Tarantino's producer, and I knew Lawrence was going to be successful. I knew Helen Hunt was going to be successful. She was in that same class. You find that the ones that are centered and focused and driven generally don't have time for much else. They're not necessarily all that social. They give you a door to open the door to you and say, "Hey, I'm doing this. What do you think?" And if you don't give them the right answer, they move on.
Yeah,
because there's no time. Life's too short.
Before we wrap things up, where can people find your work or anything that you got going on?
I've got stuff all over the place.
Yeah,
I have many shorts. When I was teaching at the San Francisco Digital Film School and San Francisco Acting Academy, I often worked with filmmakers. I had a lovely workshop I did, the writers, directors, and actors workout. And some of those filmmakers would cast me in their film. So I've done some great shorts with them. There's one called at Shadow Angel Films. Heather O'Donnell cast me in 3 of her films, and they're on that site. 3 really lovely shorts. Shadow Angel, Don't Tell Me, and oh gosh, what's the other one? Bottle Caps, where I play a homeless man looking for his daughter. Or no, I'm sorry, his daughter is looking for him. And then I did another short that's online, both on Vimeo and YouTube, different versions of it. A really great parable called Nobody's Laughing, in which I play a man who is only comfortable in his own skin unless he's made up as a clown. But he's not a clown. So it was really hard for me on that one to not clown, but rather play it straight while in clown makeup. And sort of a mockumentary is quite wonderful. You can find some of my films streaming on Amazon. The Savior of None that I shot a few years ago, I play a very depressed widower with a metal plate in his head who has epilepsy, who befriends a adolescent girl who's being raped by the local gang and abused and raped by her foster parents. Oh, light entertainment!
sounds very uplifting and light. Yeah,
It was, it's a little no-budget film that is a very important story, and because it had no budget, things are uneven in it. Acting is somewhat uneven, but there's some great moments. I'm quite proud of it, and some of the magic. I mentioned earlier that I did improv for many years with LA Theater Sports and other companies, and on set, I've learned to use the improv with the script. Example, in a film called Corked, I think about 30-40% of my performance is improvised off the script. I'd ask the 2 directors, "Do you mind if I try this? Do you mind if I try this?" And most of the time they'd say yes. And a lot of my performance that made the cut are stuff I came up with. In Nobody's Laughing, there was a special moment where my daughter, who doesn't want her dad dressed as a clown to walk her down the aisle, kisses him on the cheek and comes away with his makeup on her. And the director said, "Cut! No, let's wipe it off. Let's do it without the makeup." And I was like, "No, my God, don't you see? That's a gift. What just happened there was a friggin' gift." And it took me 10 minutes to talk him into it. He said, "Let's try it both ways." We shot it both ways. And of course he kept it that way. And then she transfers it, and I won't ruin it anymore. But
yeah,
these little miracles happen because you're open to the improv moment. In The Savior of None, where I actually had to study the having grand mal seizures for the epilepsy scene. When the little girl, when he finally pushes her out of his life because of peer pressure, and the door closes, and this was not planned, I wish it had been, I fell back. I went off, fell back and into a seizure. And luckily the director kept the camera on me, and even caught my head cracking into the bar stool that it hit. On the big screen, I felt it again. I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember that now." And it becomes an incredibly potent moment in the film. And I don't know that actors who may have minor roles or on features, or even in television, have the opportunity, or television, you have little time to get an episodic shot. But a director that trusts the actors that have the improv experience, you can mine the gold. And I think when you have the training for both your script study and your improv instincts, you'll elevate any project that you're in. And that's what I advocate.
Yeah.
So, you can find stuff that I'm doing on my Instagram. You can find me at Jeffrey J. Weissman. On Twitter, it's at Jeff, J-E-F, 1F, Weissman. On Facebook, it's at Jeffrey Weissman Actor. I often post links to stuff I'm doing. I do a lot of cons. The Back to the Future family, as much as they can, embrace me. There's this fallout. I'm in the middle of the Crispin Bob Gale bullshit. And I wish they'd both get over themselves.
I know.
And they'll post what cons, fan cons I appear at on the bttf.com. Great people over there, and the the fans. I think what's lovely on the Back to the Future thing for me is that I was pretty much in obscurity because the studio didn't want me to be promoted at all. They want to keep me a secret so Crispin wouldn't sue. Like, really? And then when it came out after he sued that I actually spoke with him and gave him fuel, they blacklisted it and got rid of me.
Wow.
So I was in obscurity for many years, and there was the DeLorean owners that discovered me and brought me into their shows and embraced me. And then the fan cons started picking me up, and I now have this nice relationship with Comic-Cons around the world.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always knew about, as long as I can remember, I knew about you taking over. So it's, the Back to the Future trilogy is my favorite trilogy. So I mean, I think it's better than the Star Wars or the Indiana Jones original trilogy, all that stuff. So yeah, I've always thought. I pinch
myself. I kind of was the adopted bastard in this thing, and you say you take over the role. I was never really told I was taking over the role.
Yeah, that's just kind of...
I'm kind of imitating Crispin and then hanging upside down. I was in very few readings or rehearsals. It was go on set and do it. And I'm like, okay. And I'd come up with bits on set, like, how's Granddad's Little Pumpkin? I said that because Michael, as Marlene, is in these hot pants that were orange that were stuffed to give him a butt. My head was the level of it looked like a pumpkin. And eating the banana on the fruit, please. Eating a banana upside down, the peel kept slapping me in the face. That was cut. My rotation for pizza was cut, where I did 4. I had some comedy, but not really.
Yeah.
It wasn't meat. I wasn't allowed. And they tried to keep me secret. It was kind of screwy. I had one crew member come over to me while we're shooting and say, "So all this torture hanging upside down was meant for Crispin." I was like, "Oh, great."
Getting his
lucky me.
Well, it was awesome talking to you, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Hey, Michael, I'm sorry you're a co-host and make it. Where are you?
Yeah,
Ian? What
Matt, I don't know where Matt went. Matt. He's I think he probably just forgot about it or got busy, unfortunately. But it's okay. Maybe next time.
Not a worry. It was really great hanging with you, Michael.
Okay, that was me talking to Jeffrey Weissman. How are you, Matt? How you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. Yeah.
Any interesting things going on in the world